The This Is PNH podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be used as medical advice. Please speak with your healthcare provider before making any treatment decisions. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Follow This Is PNH on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and listen or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Sometimes your body starts changing and you can't quite explain why.
Something feels off, but nothing obvious enough to point to.
Okay, quick scenario for you.
All right, I'm ready.
You check into a hotel,
Okay, I love this already.
but something's off. The lights are flickering, the plumbing's weird.
Something aggressively weird.
And no matter what you say to the front desk,
They're just like, that's weird.
Exactly. That's what PNH can feel like. It starts off small, little subtle things.
Easy to brush off.
Until suddenly you can't.
So the first symptom was a visual one, and then I just wasn't connecting the dots. It was brain fog, which I had no idea what that was at the time. I just kind of thought that couldn't remember things that I'd taught for years. It was all kind of bizarre, but very simple things that can go unnoticed until you can't ignore them anymore.
Yeah, that's the part that gets me.
Yeah, because none of those symptoms scream serious disease.
Right. It just sounds like life, stress, being tired.
Until it's not.
When you're told that you have PNH, when you're first told, you're like, wait, what? My immune system is essentially killing me?
Yeah, not exactly the kind of sentence you forget hearing.
No, and it's also the moment where everything shifts.
Because now you got a name.
But not necessarily understanding.
Which, if we're being honest, might be even more frustrating.
Welcome to This Is PNH.
The podcast that breaks down PNH disease.
Without making your brain hurt.
And we're here to make the science make sense.
And make sure no one else feels alone in it.
Joining us is Jessica Hackney, who's living with PNH and knows firsthand how complicated the road to diagnosis can be.
And we've got Dr. Daniel Winokur, who can help break down what's actually happening inside the body.
Without making it feel like a science lecture.
This episode of the This Is PNH podcast is sponsored by Apellis Pharmaceuticals, where courageous science and compassion drive our commitment to the PNH community. We have heard that many patients with PNH don't feel like they've received adequate education about their disease. We believe people living with PNH deserve that education, connection, understanding, and a community built around their needs. That's why we created the This Is PNH series, a destination and podcast featuring real patient voices, leading experts, and trusted conversations to help you better understand your PNH. We're here to help you stay informed, connected, and empowered on your journey. Visit thisispnh.com today. All right, let's actually talk about what PNH is.
Yes, because it's kind of intense, it sounds intense, and really it is.
And at its core, PNH is a rare blood disease where your immune system basically gets confused and starts attacking your own red blood cells.
Which is not ideal.
Also, we have to talk about the name.
We sure do, because it's a lot.
It sure is. PNH stands for Paroxysmal Nocturnal Hemoglobinuria.
Which sounds like something you'd yell in a wizard duel.
Expelliarmus energy for sure. But it just actually describes what's happening.
A sudden breakdown of red blood cells, often noticed in night or in the morning.
Okay, but hearing that definition and actually understanding it...
It's two different things.
So Jessica came up with her own way to explain it.
And honestly, it's kind of brilliant.
Nobody else in my world would ever understand. So I basically just say that my red blood cells lack a protein, and my immune system sees those as a foreign object it needs to destroy, and therefore it destroys my red blood cells. And I explained that my clone size is so great that at the time of my diagnosis, it was 97% of my red blood cells lacked this. And so the rate that they were being destroyed was immense. That obviously sounds very scary. Your red blood cells, isn't that what carries oxygen? I explained to other people about how the medications work so that I am not so sick and I'm not going to die, essentially. I explained to them that if we could look at our immune system as like a hotel, and it has different floors in it, And I say that my medicine puts a wall up on this floor. And so that protects me from my red blood cells being compromised, because there's really no way to put a protein on my red blood cells, essentially. So it puts a wall up at that floor so that it doesn't get attacked to the degree that they were. So I guess that's kind of the non-doctor way of explaining PNH.
Okay, wait.
That's so good.
Yeah, like suddenly I get it.
Yeah, like it clicked in a way that medical definitions never do for me.
It is also slightly terrifying.
It's also extremely effective.
So, in this hotel, your red blood cells are like the guests.
Yeah, they're checking in, they're
Mhm.
checking out, they're keeping everything running.
And normally, every guest has a key card.
Proof that they belong.
But in PNH,
Some of those guests never get one.
So, the big question is why? What's actually going wrong here?
And for that, we're going to need an expert. Someone who understands what's happening behind the scenes.
Dr. Daniel Winokur.
So basically, PNH is a stem cell disorder, meaning inside of the bone marrow where the stem cells that make all of your new blood reside, that arises from a mutation in a single gene called big A that makes the red blood cells not have a specific protein on their cell surface.
Okay, so the keycard machine is broken.
Exactly. Which means now these red blood cells are just unprotected.
And the immune system
Sees them as a problem.
That makes them susceptible to attack from the complement system, which is a part of the immune system.
So now, hotel security, which is your immune system.
otherwise known as the complement system.
Yes, it's supposed to protect the guests, but instead it starts seeing those guests are actually the problem.
So instead of protecting them, it's actually attacking them.
And that attack has a name.
Which leads to hemolysis, meaning the early breakdown of red blood cells in the bloodstream and in the spleen, reticulated endothelial system.
That attack has a name. Hemolysis.
Which already kind of sounds aggressive.
Yeah, because it is.
So this isn't like a polite checkout situation.
No, this is not. Thanks for staying with us.
This is more like you're at a party, music's going, everything's fine.
And then suddenly security shows up, points at you, and is like, you, out, now.
No explanation.
No warning.
And now only are you just getting kicked out.
It's happening fast.
And kind of aggressively.
And that, my friends, is hemolysis.
And so you end up getting profound anemia, hemolysis, and the sequelae of that, which is essentially a highly inflammatory state from the byproducts of red blood cell fragments broken down in your system. So you get anemia and the symptoms of that, and then you get this kind of immunoinflammation from circulating free hemoglobin, circulating iron, and all of these things that are supposed to be inside of your cells are now outside.
All right, I'm going to be honest. I would not want to be a red blood cell right now.
No, absolutely not. Worst hotel experience imaginable.
This leads to not only anemia, but the biggest and most prevalent symptom that you can present with, which is thrombosis, blood clots, particularly at days. So it's a multi-system disease because obviously you have blood in every organ.
And this doesn't just stay in one place.
Right. This affects the entire body.
Which is why symptoms can feel all over the place.
And why it's so hard to catch early on.
So red blood cells, just like every cell, has a certain shelf life or a certain lifespan. And so every 90 days or so, you produce another, a whole new 6 liters of blood. So this is a continuous process that's happening all the time. So you're making billions of new red blood cells every hour. So you could describe it as the lifespan of the red blood cells being shorter. And so the amount of red blood cells you need to make increases. And at a certain point, the bone marrow can't compensate. So the production and the destruction, or the lifespan of the red blood cells and the production, there's a mismatch there. So you get an anemia over time, like a red blood cell debt, you could call it. Or you could describe it like the red blood cells are popping or exploding or being broken down inside of the body. And, there's 2 versions of that. There's intravascular hemolysis and extravascular, meaning intravascular is inside of the blood vessels themselves, and extravascular being outside of the blood vessels in a system we call the reticuloendothelial system, which really is the spleen is the majority of that, but there's other cells in the liver and in other areas.
So your body is constantly making red blood cells.
Yes, but in PNH, they're being destroyed faster than your body can replace them.
So IVH is intravascular hemolysis, meaning, again, within the veins or arteries themselves. That's usually from something called the membrane attack complex. When we're talking about PNH, that's from complement, this part of the immune system, activating something called the membrane attack complex, which is a tiny piece of machinery that is used to protect the body from invading things. And basically, there's a cascade of events that leads to the assembly of this machine that goes onto cells to destroy them. And so that actually pops or makes a little hole in the red blood cells, and they explode inside of the blood vessels.
Okay, so back to our hotel.
Always back to the hotel.
Intravascular hemolysis is like security breaking into rooms.
Fast, messy, happening right there in the hallway.
And then EVH is extravascular hemolysis. And this is hemolysis that happens outside of the blood vessels themselves. And mostly this is happening in the spleen, where the spleen is actually eating and taking out of circulation red blood cells that are tagged or opsonized by C3 or tagged, opsonized by C3 in this case, or tagged for destruction by some other means and are actually eaten by the spleen or the reticuloendothelial system.
Same hotel.
Different situation.
Now guests are quietly being pulled aside.
Taken out the back, never to be seen again.
Dun, dun, dun.
Exactly. It's still hemolysis.
It's just happening outside of the main blood flow of our bloodstream.
And both of these are happening in PNH?
Yep. Sometimes at the same time, which is part of what makes this disease so complex and honestly so hard to catch early on.
And then BTH is breakthrough hemolysis. Breakthrough hemolysis is something we talk about particularly in the context of complement inhibition. So typically when you start patients with PNH or any other complement inhibitors, they work incredibly well and quite swiftly. So people typically normalize rather quickly and do well. And then during periods of increased stress, particularly infections, and since 2020 or since 2019, COVID-19 has been a big source of this. But if you get some acute inflammatory stress that accelerates the amount of complement in your system, it can overload the amount of complement inhibition that is happening from the medicine you're on. And so this can lead to breakthrough hemolysis because essentially the complement breaks through the drug. And so you get a rebound hemolysis that happens transiently, hopefully transiently, in response to this acute inflammatory stress. Most commonly, this is infection, COVID-19 being a big one, but other infections as well.
Breakthrough hemolysis.
Which sounds technical, but really it just means this.
Even when the treatment is working.
Something like an infection can throw everything off.
And those attacks can break through again.
Which is incredibly frustrating. So now, we've got three key terms.
Intravascular hemolysis, extravascular hemolysis, breakthrough hemolysis.
And understanding those is a huge step in understanding what's actually happening inside of your body.
But what does that actually feel like?
So the hemolysis that ensues from the lack of GPI proteins on the cell surface of red blood cells, you get severe fatigue, like Jessi is describing. You could get smooth muscle dysfunction from nitric oxide being sequestered by increased hemoglobin hemolysis. So you get dysphagia or trouble swallowing. You can have problems with your GI system, constipation or diarrhea, and a whole host of other problems in the lining of the blood vessels or the endothelial system, which is really an organ system in itself. So you get dysfunction across multiple organs as a result of the hemolysis.
But here's the thing, knowing the language is just one part of the journey.
Living through it, that is something else entirely.
And for Jessica, getting that point of understanding didn't happen overnight.
I might have been the biggest barrier just because I didn't connect the dots. My first symptoms until I was diagnosed was 3.5 months. But by the time that I realized something was desperately wrong, and I actually told a doctor about it. They sent me to, I believe it was a kidney specialist, and then they drew my blood. And that's how this whole process started. and that my hemoglobin was a 6.6. And so then I went to the hospital and they were like, there's no way your hemoglobin's, that's you. Like they got this wrong. You're walking in here looking pretty normal. And so, it was me, obviously. And from there, the doctor said, we can admit you. You're really sick. I don't know what's wrong. You need at least 6 blood transfusions, but I don't even know if that's going to help. Your body's adapted to this. And I just made the decision not to admit myself into the hospital. It was the end of the school year. I mean, just a bunch of things. And, hospital's not my favorite place. So I call it the summer being a pincushion. So I found out my hemoglobin was that low in May, and I wasn't diagnosed with PNH until October, late October. I went to numerous specialists. I gave so many samples of, and it was a wild journey.
That space between knowing something is wrong
and actually getting an answer,
that's the hardest part for a lot of people.
It can take a long time. So any what we would call rare orphan diseases, which are diseases that are profoundly rare, like 1 in a million, where there's a few thousand patients in the country, it poses a major diagnostic challenge because there's a saying in medical school: if you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. And what that means is, if we were to look for very rare diseases in every patient who exhibited a symptom, we'd be sending crazy tests all the time for everybody, and we would go bankrupt as a society as a result. So you have to have some discernment in terms of ordering tests. At the same time, for rare diseases, you do have to have a really high degree of suspicion, and you have to keep your antenna up so that you never miss these patients.
So most of the time, doctors are looking for the most likely explanation. As Dr. Winokur mentioned, in medicine there's a saying, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras.
which makes sense. But PNH is the zebra.
The other symptoms that go along with this disease, you could attribute to any one of 1,000 different diagnoses. Fatigue is one of the most vague symptoms that there is. And fatigue is one of the kind of hallmarks of this disease. And to try to tell a doctor, well, no, it's not normal fatigue. It's not like adult fatigue. It's profound. We can't, it's like pain. It's not objective. It's a subjective symptom.
So that moment when you start questioning yourself,
Even though you know something's wrong,
that's something we hear all the time in rare disease stories.
I was sometimes the youngest person by far in the hospital room, or in the waiting room, I should say. The doctor that I had at the time, she was a bulldog about it. She was like, I know something's wrong. We're not giving up. She did send me to one doctor that, and I think we kind of, maybe not all of us have to go through that, but made to feel like we're crazy, even though you're not. So I did have that experience, which almost turned me off to just be like, okay, I don't want to do this. But she wasn't going to let me do that.
that moment,
When you start to question yourself, even though you know something isn't right.
that's something we hear a lot about in rare disease.
So she said, I'm going to send you to a hematologist, which I had no idea what that was. I had to look it up, went there, and she listed off all these things, blah, blah, blah. And one of them being, oh, you might need your gallbladder removed. It could be this. And then one of the things she did say, and I remember her saying it, is that your immune system could be attacking your red blood cells. And I'm like, okay. And so then she took a whole bunch of vials of blood and just sent those away. And then probably, it feels like it was 3 days, could have been longer. I get a phone call that says she thinks she knows what's wrong with you. Now she needs you to go in and give one more sample of blood. And then that's when they did the flow cytometry test, or whatever it's called, if I'm saying it correctly.
Flow cytometry, yeah.
And she did that.
But eventually,
Jessica did get an answer.
and honestly, just having an answer,
Well, that can change everything.
And then I got the phone call that to say that I was elated is an understatement. I mean, at this point, I just wanted an answer. And I felt like I was pretty sure I wasn't dying. So anything would have been better than nothing.
that moment,
Yeah, where it's like, finally.
you just need an answer.
And that answer comes from one really important test, flow cytometry.
It can feel overwhelming fast, like you go from, I finally have answers,
to, wait, now I need to understand my entire immune system?
I know, which is a lot. Because on one hand...
Well, you finally have answers.
But on the other hand...
You're being introduced to this whole new system in your body, one you've probably never had to think about before.
I know, quick crash course and immunology all.
No big deal.
But that learning curve, it can also feel so isolating.
Yeah, especially when the people around you, they don't get it.
The best way to describe it is you're just alone, but you're not physically alone, but you feel like you're so alone, and you try to explain this to other people and get them to understand, and then most of them are just like, yeah, okay, or that seems really weird, and they just don't get it.
And that feeling of being alone, even when people are around you.
It's something we hear again and again in orphan or zebra diseases.
On behalf of the medical system, I mean, it's a harrowing story, and I hear this all the time. And I'm so happy you got a diagnosis, and I'm so sorry that this has been your experience with the medical system. It sounds like you had an amazing doctor, though, who like had the resilience to stick with it. But, rare orphan diseases are like almost every patient who has a really rare disease describes something very similar to what you're saying, which is they feel kind of castigated or thrown out by the medical system because we feel really uncomfortable. Doctors, when we don't know what's going on, it makes us really uncomfortable.
That isolation.
Yeah, it's a huge part of the PNH diagnosis journey.
But it's why connection matters so much.
Yes, because the second you find someone who gets it,
like really gets it,
everything shifts.
Mm-hmm.
I think for any orphan disease, actually like Facebook or social media these days is actually a good resource. So with PNH, there's a support group, there's PNH Foundation, and then a lot of the companies who are involved in the complement inhibitors have really good resources, including patients that have the disease. And so you can actually have patients call a patient who's already been through it. And I have two patients kind of in my Rolodex who have agreed, like, if I have a patient who's really scared and new with the diagnosis, I have the ringer PNH patients, the veterans, call them and just be like, what are your questions? What are your fears? And talk them through it. Because like you said, Jessi, yeah, you're totally alone. You can't tell your friends, your loved ones about this. You can't even tell most doctors about it because nobody understands what you're going through. And it is a very desperate and lonely feeling. So just knowing that there's other people who have it, who you can talk to, is tremendously beneficial.
But the reality is,
you're not alone.
Even if it feels like it at first.
And that's something we're going to keep coming back to.
Because once you find that connection, everything starts to feel a little more manageable. But the next question becomes, Amy, what happens now?
And the answer
is something that's completely changed over time.
The most incredible thing is just the therapies that we have now in terms of complement inhibitors, which we'll get to, they're one of the most profound classes of drugs that I've gotten to see in my career. And so it's been a paradigm shift in terms of the therapeutics we have.
What was once life-threatening is now manageable.
And Jessica felt that shift firsthand.
I knew that the first thing I had to do was get on a medicine so that, because by the time I was diagnosed, it is a life-threatening disease, but at that time it was made rather clear to me that, hey, you've had this now for several years. You're finally being diagnosed. We need to get started on this now. And so I did everything I needed to do to get on the medication quickly. And once I did, just like the doctor said, I responded very well. And so that was really exciting.
That kind of turnaround.
It is so powerful. So today, we started at the beginning.
The road to diagnosis.
We learned some of the language.
And maybe it a little less overwhelming.
Because when you understand what's happening, you take back a little control.
And if you're listening and this feels familiar, you're not alone.
This is PNH.
And this is just the beginning. For more information, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
This is PNH, and we're just getting started. To learn more about resources and tools to help empower your journey with PNH, visit thisispnh.com. The This Is PNH podcast is produced by Bloodstream Media and made possible by Apellis Pharmaceuticals. If you found this conversation helpful, make sure you're subscribed and tap the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Follow the This Is PNH on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and listen or subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for being part of the community, and always remember to talk to your doctor for any medical questions.